Great. So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining in on this today. I'm glad there's so much interest in reclassification because we have some interesting opportunities coming in from this tactical basin plan. So as I said, I'm Marie Levesque-Caduto. I'm called the Watershed Planner for this region. And as Margot said, I'm right now finishing up the West Williams Saxtons plan. And this reclassification piece is certainly a good part of that. So what I'd like to do is, come on, there we go. Run through a couple of things, make sure everybody knows when I start using some of these strange terms, what they actually mean, how we got here, kind of this process, water classifications has evolved over the years. So I'll run through that quickly. And then certainly one of the biggest questions we always get is, what does this mean for my land? So let's talk about the implications of land uses that this has and what's going on right now with the Saxtons River for reclassification. And as we want to move it forward, how do we go about doing that? So if you have questions about any particular slide as I'm going through it, please feel free to ask. And I can't see the chat, Margo, so if you can monitor that while we're going forward, please let me know. So the definitions that I want everybody to understand, and there's a lot of words here, but I just want to run through this quickly. Designated use is what classifications are based on. So we have a bunch of different levels of classifications, but they're all based on these 8 things. So aquatic biota, what lives in the water. Aquatic habitat is where they live and the condition of that. Swimming, boating, fishing. Aesthetics, basically how it looks. Is it pretty? Do we like to sit there and watch the water? Public water supply, drinking water. We do still use surface waters for drinking water supply sometimes. And irrigation. So all those 8 different things are what are EPA termed as existing uses, and that's what these classifications are based on. We also have something called existing uses. Sorry, those were designated uses. These are existing uses. And it's any of these uses as long as it's happened after November 28th, 1975. That's just, you know, kind of when the Clean Water Act was really kicking into gear. So that's the date. So anything that has happened on the water since that date is classified as an existing use and can and should be protected. It might not be happening anymore. That swimming hole might have filled in from one of the storms, but that means swimming is an existing use on that water. And the last one that's important is what we mean by impaired waters. And that just means that through all the monitoring that we do, physical, chemical, biological, that particular water doesn't meet the Vermont standards for water quality. So at that point, it becomes impaired, and that kicks in all kinds of regulatory events and restrictions that have to be dealt with. So those are the 3 terms: designated use, existing use, and impaired water that I'll be using throughout this. So when we talk about classification, all waters in Vermont have a classification based on one of those designated uses. But it's only based on 7 of the 8. We don't include irrigation as one of the existing uses. And I'm not going to try to explain why, because I don't know the answer to that. But it was not included as a classification. So any particular body of water, a piece of the Saxtons or a tributary or a lake or a pond, can be designated for one or more of those designated uses. It could be a swimming and a boating. It could be swimming and drinking water, or it could be all 7 of them. It could be just one. So they vary, and we classify to the highest use that we're looking to protect. And waters are reclassified in two ways. They're either reclassified by the Agency of Natural Resources because we have data to demonstrate that they meet that classification, or they can be reclassified from a public petition. So that's where you all come in on this process. So this is all transitioned in the past half decade. So before 2015, we had three classifications. We had A1, B, and A2. And I'm just going to kind of get A2 out of the way because that's drinking water supply. So if we use the river and like Lake Champlain as drinking water supply, they are classified as A2s. And those have a whole different set of regulatory requirements. Obviously, you know, it makes a difference that you're going to use it for public consumption. So I'm not going to include that conversation except to highlight a couple of things as we move forward with this. I'm going to focus on the A's and the B's, the A1s and the B's. And when you look at those two, you see that the first thing it says is all uses are supported. That means all 8 of those designated uses have to be supported at the very excellent condition level before we can classify something as A1. And that is an incredibly high standard to meet, because that means it might be a fantastic boating reach, but the aquatic habitat isn't so great, so we can't do it. You know, if you have to meet qualifications for all 7 of those designated uses, very hard to do. So at that point, everything else was B, just a straight B classification, which is for all uses in good condition. And our waters generally meet that. It's pretty rare that we have waters that don't meet B qualifications. And B is still good waters. It's boatable, swimmable, fishable. You know, that doesn't mean there's a pollutant there. It just means that it's not our most excellent conditions. So when you look at that from a water quality ranking perspective, we have criteria for each of these levels. And when we monitor the waters, you know, if something reaches that A1 water quality and we test and all those parameters, the chemistry, the biology, they all meet those really excellent conditions, we're at A1. If someone wants to put in a development, a wastewater treatment plant, an industrial facility that discharges wastewater, they have to get a permit to do that. And they can add this much pollution to that reach of river. And the water will still meet that A1 condition. However, over time, as this permit gets permitted and that project gets permitted and the next project gets permitted, you can see that gradually those pollutant discharges are going to accumulate over time. And the water will get degraded just a little bit every time that happens. So as that excellent condition gets degraded, it can go down to the level of criteria that meets that B water quality standard without any impact to classification. But as soon as it breaks that boundary of the criteria that we have for B, it becomes an impaired water. And once it's impaired, I'm sure you've heard about Lake Champlain and everything that has to be done to clean up Lake Champlain. That's because it's an impaired water. All kinds of wonderful regulations kick in at that point that make it both difficult and expensive to clean up the waters. And that's what has to happen when a water is classified as impaired. So we don't want to go there. Right? We don't want our good quality waters to be degraded over time to the point where they become impaired waters. So that's why we have gone after 2015 and redone our classification system so that now it includes 3 levels outside of that drinking water category. So we've got A1, B1, and B2 now. And the first thing you notice is that it doesn't say all uses anymore. It says the use, a particular use. So whatever that water might be designated for, if it's aquatic habitat, that this is an excellent spawning stream for fish. So we have it as aquatic habitat A1. At that point, those are in excellent conditions. And again, that gradual degradation permit by permit can happen. But because we now have a center line, that if it's classified as A1, it cannot be degraded beyond the B1 category. It can't be degraded all the way down to the lowest level of B. So we now have an interim stop log, basically, that prevents degradation of our very high quality waters. So if it's a B1, again, those permit discharges can potentially degrade the water, but it has to go a whole nother level down before it can become an impaired water. So it's a really good way to protect our high quality waters from, so it's an A1, can never be degraded down to B2. So that's how the classification system works. And it's based on these 7 uses, as I mentioned earlier, and each classification, A1, B1, and B2, has these don't look like they're strict in any way, but they all have numeric criteria that go along with them. So as we're looking at an A1 aquatic habitat criteria, there are standards that water needs to meet. And we use the terms good and very good and excellent, but they all have numbers to back them up. And that's how these are classified as ANR does them. And we can do that. There are very few A1 waters at this point. By statute, all waters that are at a 2,500 foot elevation and above are automatically A1 waters, because they are all our headwater high elevation streams. There are a few that are petitioned already, like Cobb Brook, where Hamilton Falls is. That's an A1 by petition from the community. And shortly after 2015, ANR put forward with the Green Mountain National Forest a whole bunch of waters in the forest, and those have now been reclassified as A1. So there are some out there, not a ton. We're kind of talking to you folks because we're in the process of developing B1 options and proposals, so I'm hoping we'll move some of those forward. And everything else currently is classified as B2. So our goal is to take all the general B2 categories and break them down and find the ones that meet B1 and A1 and move those classifications up so they're better protected. And this is going to be a whole bunch of words, but this is why it's all happening. As the Vermont Water Quality Standards, which is this document, the reclassification process happens either during the basin planning process or on a receipt of a request, basically a public petition to do that reclassification. And this is our water quality standard. This is how we do it. So this is the documentation behind it. And why this matters, what is it that we want to do with reclassification, is all based on what's called our anti-degradation policy, which basically says that you got to keep the good waters good. The existing uses, those that have happened on the river since 1975, the waters and the level of water quality necessary to protect those existing uses shall be maintained and protected regardless of the water's classification. So even if it is currently a B2 right now, but it is excellent aquatic habitat, excellent spawning habitat for fish and bugs, then it can't be degraded based on the anti-degradation policy. But we want to make sure that it's very clearly understood that that is what this water is by reclassifying it. So everyone understands that this is a water to be protected. That's what reclassification is kind of all about. And just to back that up, the high quality waters, which are, they haven't been reclassified yet, but they are high quality. They meet or exceed the applicable water quality criteria because of their benefits. In these cases, the water level, the level of water quality necessary to maintain and protect those uses shall be maintained. So though that word shall is really important. It means you got to do this. You can't just say, yeah, it would be good to do that. No, we shall do it. And that is part of the mandate of the Department of Environmental Conservation, is to make sure that happens. So what does that mean on the ground as far as land use? And this chart was created to compare A1. So what does it mean if we classify something from B2 to A1? What's that mean for your backyard? And as far as forestry, silviculture goes, as long as you're doing logging work and forest work based on the acceptable management practices, which are the standards for forestry, there's no change in what you can do on your land. Same thing with agriculture. As long as you're following the required ag practices, there's no restrictions put on that land. A couple of things it does make a difference too, like if you want to locate a solid waste facility, or you want to have a discharge permit, or a waste, an indirect discharge, which is larger wastewater systems. Yes, there are implications for what you can and cannot do. And that's the whole idea. Some things are not appropriate in our most pristine waters. So for those things, stream flow protection, there's nothing. Stream alteration, if you need to do something on your stream bank, it's still fine. It does, if you're under Act 250, Act 250 requires a 50 to 100 foot buffer. And if you're in an A1 water, it means you have to go with the larger 100-foot buffer. And same thing with these the permits. And it doesn't mean you can't develop. It just means you have to do it in a way that will maintain that exceptional water quality. So this is the Saxtons River Watershed, and the purple and the tan and the blue areas are the waters that are already reclassified or classified in one of those A1s or A2s, and you can see there's not much. This tiny little tip, this tiny little tip of the headwaters, and this, oh, I just froze again. There we go. It'll come back eventually. Here we go. So this one here is, I'll talk about in a minute. This is a drinking water supply. So the only A1 water is above 2,500 feet in the very tip of the watershed.
Marie?
Yep.
So is that the section of the Saxtons River headwaters that's up on Glebe Mountain? Classified?
Let's go back and see.
And Bill, if you know from the map.
I'm pretty sure it is.
No, that's down here, right?
No, it's way up in the sort of northwest corner of Wyndham.
Okay. So this is Cobb Brook. This is the petitioned classification for Cobb Brook. So it's just above Cobb Brook.
Okay, I'm pretty sure that's up on Glebe Mountain where the.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Peter. The headwaters of the Saxtons River are on Glebe Mountain, so.
Oh, and so this is Magic Mountain right here.
Yeah, right.
So that's where it is.
So that's 1A up in that one little part?
Route 11,
Right,
and this is Magic Mountain Ski Area.
correct.
I think Bill was asking just clarification that that pink area is currently classified as A1.
Yes, this is the A1 because it's above 2,500 feet, and this is A1 because of a public petition to protect Cobb Brook.
Thank you.
I have a question. Does any of that water follow Route 121 down through went through Wyndham and then down into Grafton, Houghtonville?
This would be 121 through here. So, okay, I gotta get, I'm not used to looking at it without the roads on it. Yeah, so this is coming down into Townsend, straight, I mean,
Oh.
Wyndham Hill Road, right?
Okay, Townsend. All right. I'm looking more to the.
Yeah, so this is Wyndham Hill Road. This is 121 into Grafton.
Okay.
This is, yeah, that's the corners there.
Doesn't part of the Saxtons River follow 121 though? I was looking at a map earlier today. I thought one branch of the Saxtons almost parallels
Yeah,
right along 121 into
yeah,
Grafton.
that's the main, the upper end of the main stem, which is through here. This
Okay.
is the watershed line. So
Yeah.
this is the boundary of the whole watershed.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So for reclassification purposes, I will quickly talk about those A2 water supply waters. There are a number that I'm proposing in this basin plan that towns no longer use or facilities no longer use for drinking water. So to protect them properly, we want to move them out of A2, that drinking water category, and into either A1 or B1. And the one that is in the Saxtons River Watershed is basically the old drinking water supply for Vermont Academy, which is on Signal Hill Brook or Bowles Brook, depending on which one name you use. So that's this little one here that's circled in black. So that is, I'm proposing that, and I have already confirmed with the school that they do not use this for drinking water. So that's just one of the examples of how we use this. We want to protect that water because it's still close to their drinking water wells, but the surface water itself is not used for drinking water. And we have a number of those throughout the basin that I'll be working on. So this is the Saxtons River Watershed, and these are all the proposals that I'm putting forward in the basin plan for reclassification. So the ones that are in the Saxtons, let me see if I can't change this and make it somewhat visible. Oh, of course it won't. So this here, this green part of the upper Saxtons River is a candidate for B1. It already meets the B1 criteria. Basically, the river from Grafton upstream, all the way up through Wyndham, meets B1. So we want to propose that. Howe Brook, which some of you are very familiar with, that is drained from Glebe, is a candidate for A1. That the standards for that, we still need a little bit of monitoring on that to confirm it, but that should be able to go forward as an A1 reclassification. Bull Creek through Athens coming down and all through that area is already meeting A1 classifications. And then the other one the other ones I'm putting forward are Twin Falls. Twin Falls is, this isn't on the Saxtons, but it's so close I put it in anyways, which is Bellows Falls, the Great Falls, because I'm putting those forward for an outstanding resource water, which is a different type of designation to protect waters, and I'll talk about that in just a minute.
Isn't that Westminster, Twin Falls?
Yes, but it's on the Saxtons River.
Okay.
Marie, this is Lisa. So can you explain again the upper Saxtons River? What exactly is the area that we're talking about there?
It would be able to cover the whole river from Grafton to the west. So up towards, from Grafton Village to the headwaters is meeting currently the criteria we have for a B1.
Okay, so from Grafton Village all the way to the headwaters. Okay, got it. Thank you. Yeah.
And Marie, are you talking about main stem of the Saxtons River and all the little tributaries that run into it?
Yep,
Okay.
which is really great. That water's in really nice shape. We have had what we call a sentinel monitoring site on the upper Saxtons for many decades. So we have really good water quality on the upper Saxtons. We also reclassify wetlands there are 3 classifications of wetlands, class 1, class 2, and class 3. And I'm putting forward in the Athens Dome wetland are kind of the Turner Hill Wildlife Management Area, the Turner Hill property up there. There's some beautiful wetlands up through that whole ridge that have preliminary studies saying they would meet class 1. And I also, again, I put in Herrick's Cove just because it's still in Rockingham. It's on the Williams, but those wetlands as well are being put forward for study for potential wetland reclassification. Outstanding resource waters is a whole nother classification. It's not officially a classification, it's called a designation. And this is both federal and state designation. And the reason I like this is because it's got much broader options for how you can protect a river or any water. So you can do it on any one of these 13 criteria. It can be great for water quality, aquifer protection, if it feeds, a lot of groundwater, floodwater storage, habitat, fish habitat and wildlife habitat, threatened or endangered species protection. It can be done, that's why I'm putting Twin Falls and Great Falls forward. Geologic features that are really key and important, and scenic and archaeological and historic. So you think about Bellows Falls, and between the petroglyphs and the canal and the first bridge across the Connecticut River, there's all kinds of reasons to protect the Connecticut River down that way as well. It can be done for natural areas, and it can be done for research study potential. So ORW is a different kind of protection, but it is a protection, and protects specific features of a water. If you're familiar with the Jamaica swimming area up on Kidder Brook, there's an amazing set of falls and swimming holes that people use all the time. It's spectacular. And so that has been petitioned again as an ORW. It's the only one in the area that we have. So it's a really nice option for specific protections. So on the left, I hope you can identify Twin Falls, which is a beautiful site and certainly worthy of protection. And on the right are the petroglyphs in Rockingham on the Connecticut River. And as I said, there are, right in Bellows Falls, there are some really great reasons to go for ORW on the Connecticut River itself because of all these historic things that have happened in that location. So to move it forward, what we're looking at is we have, as an agency, we have the ability to move classification forward on our own if we have the data to support it, which is why we were able to do those Green Mountain National Forest ones in association with them, because we had the data to move that forward on our own. We can also do it through petition. So if we want to move a lot of these others forward, we need to receive public interest in telling us that you want us to do that. And Margot has the petitions, so I'll put it on her. So she can work with you, and Corey and I can all work with whoever's interested in moving those petitions forward. But I will provide some caveats that this takes time. If we get a petition, it's not going to happen overnight because it has to go through an internal A&R process for review and make sure that it meets other criteria before we can put it forward. And then it goes through the whole legislative process. So, and we only do it on the biennium, so every other year. So it will take at least 2 years for a process to play out. And this is why. That's what the process looks like. So I don't expect you to read that, but I just wanted you to get a sense for how this all works. It has to go through a complete legislative process that we do periodically to update our water quality standards, because these classifications are part of the Vermont water quality standards. They have to go through all of this. But it does happen. We have already done the Green Mountain National Forest ones, so the process is becoming more and more familiar, and we are really anxious to put more of these forward, because it doesn't sound like 2015 is all that new, but it's taken us a long time to work out all these details, to set the criteria, to get all the numbers in place, to figure out how to petition for them and get those all set up. So we're at the point where we're ready to go, which is really, I think is really exciting. And I'm really pleased that the Saxtons River group is interested in working on that and putting some of these forward so we can get the process in gear and get it to start happening.
Marie, I'm curious in this, I mean, obviously this is a very complicated, long process. And, you know, reclassifying waters, like say the Saxtons River Watershed Collaborative put forward a petition, it goes to the state, but, you know, obviously we want to engage the communities. If we're talking about, say, the upper Saxtons River, reclassifying those sections, that really affects mostly, I mean, obviously it will affect the whole river because it's all downstream, but, you know, the communities of Windham and Grafton are probably going to want to be informed and knowledgeable about this process. Where does that type of engagement really fall? I see that it's somewhere in the middle line there where there's public outreach, but does that mean that the petitions should be put in to get the internal stuff going, and then we reach out to the public and the select boards and things like that? Or do we start with the public so that they know it's happening and then put in a petition?
I think it's a good idea to inform the communities that the petition is going to be submitted, right? Just so everyone knows what's happening. So there are a couple of opportunities for public input and public outreach. So we want to do that early, and this is actually early in the process. This G bolt here. Oh, I'm on the wrong screen. So this one here is basically as we put it into the tactical basin plan, right? So there's going to be, I have all these proposed right now. So they will go through the public process as people review the draft tactical basin plan over the next couple of months. So that's kind of the first level of public outreach and input, is as the tactical plan gets approved. So once that is there, as I said, if the group is interested in submitting a petition, I think it's always good to inform the communities that you're doing that, so they are aware of that. However, we are required as part of the legislative process to do official public hearings. So we have to do that outreach, and hopefully it will be in partnership with the Saxtons River Coalition to do that, to bring the community together so that everybody understands what this means. Again, those land use implications. We don't want anybody going into this and coming out and saying, what the heck did you do? You know, we want to make sure there's good public buy-in. But it is a legislative decision on whether or not this goes forward. So we have to do public outreach, public hearings, and do the same thing we do for the basin plan, collect public comments and respond to those.
So in terms of reaching out early, you know, like if, and I'm just saying if the Saxtons River Watershed Collaborative decided to put in a petition, right? Before we submit the petition, would you suggest going to the select boards of the communities that that it's affected and ask them to put it on an agenda? Would you do that and a public meeting? Like, or would you try to announce the public to attend the select board meeting? What does all that potentially look like?
I think, you know, depending on the community and the response from and who's putting it forward, sometimes we're working with town officials, conservation commissions, things like that are glad to put these things forward as well. So I think if you have the ability to do that kind of outreach and input and be in front of the select board or the conservation commission or whatever to make sure that there's not, you know, some specific reason that they say, no, this is, you know, this area is where we have set aside for an industrial park. So we don't necessarily want to put an A1 right there. You know, you want to make sure your petition is in agreement with the town plan and what's going on within the community, because it's just going to cause conflict down the road. So the earlier you can find that out, the better.
Okay, and there is the possibility, correct, of like if, for example, I think this is actually happening on the Green River, where we're also, the Green River Watershed Alliance is trying to work through this same process. But if, for example, and I don't even know if this exists, but you know, if along the main stem of the Saxtons River, one of the tributaries, there was a big planned wastewater treatment plant on that tributary, that doesn't knock out the whole thing. We would just take off that tributary, right?
Correct. Yeah, and it would, so what the agency doesn't want to do is reclassify a water that doesn't come close to meeting the water quality standards for that water. So if we classify something that we know already has a wastewater discharge that is impacting the water quality, we are instantly creating an impaired water. And certainly we don't want to do that, because that kicks in all this regulation and costs and everything else. So we want to make sure that the waters we are reclassifying are either at or near the water quality standard for that classification. Because otherwise we're putting ourselves, the community, and the town into an expensive fix. So obviously we have to be careful for that.